Today, we're going to be focusing on one of the major global health issues as of recently. And I'm sure you guys have heard of HIV/AIDS. It is so prevalent within the context of global health and public health, and when we go to study epidemics and epidemiology. However, a lot of things about HIV/AIDS actually require a kind of closer look at how HIV works, how it can lead to AIDS. And we will talk about what HIV and AIDS actually stands for. And we will talk about them within the context of global and public health. So this should be very interesting. Before I get started, does anyone have like anything they already know about HIV/AIDS? This is also like a topic you guys don't get into until high school, so I wouldn't be surprised if you guys didn't know. So it's all good if none of you guys have really heard about or learned about HIV/AIDS. No worries. Okay. I'm going to go ahead and get started, and you can just feel free to jump in at any time. Alan just joined, so glad to see that. So Alan, since you just joined, we're going to be talking about HIV and AIDS today within the context of public health. Okay, so if we want to start, we kind of want to focus on the molecular and cellular basis of HIV. How does HIV affect the body? And HIV, by the way, stands for the human immunodeficiency virus. And we will talk about what the terms human immunodeficiency actually mean, because immunodeficiency is a big word, but if we break it down into its components, we'll be able to see that it actually describes HIV slash AIDS really accurately. Okay, so normally when a virus goes to infect our body, the virus attaches to a cell, and the goal of the virus is to make as many replications of itself as possible. That is the whole point of the virus's that is the virus's ultimate goal. If you ever get a bacterial infection, that is also the bacteria's goal. They want to make as many copies of themselves as possible to further the infection, really. However, HIV is actually very different from what a normal virus will do. Normal viruses carry DNA. We carry DNA. Normal viruses carry DNA. That is just standard between us and, say, like the cold virus. When you get a cold, or when you get it's called rhinovirus, actually. When you get rhinovirus, it is DNA that is it is the viral DNA that is attacking you. However, when you contract HIV, or hopefully you will never contract HIV, but the way HIV works is the HIV virus, it carries something we call viral RNA. And so RNA and DNA, we've gone over the differences of RNA and DNA before, but RNA is single-stranded. If you all remember how DNA is a double-stranded helix, it kind of looks like a ladder that's been twisted about itself. And so if you imagine that ladder without one side, it's a single, like if a ladder, you just chopped off half of the ladder, that's what RNA would look like. It's single-stranded, and there are some differences between RNA and DNA as well. One of the bases is different, but we won't get into that. I think there's a RNA and DNA video on my YouTube, so you guys can feel free to look at that if you guys so please. However, what we want to know is that the viral RNA, when HIV affects the body, the RNA affects helper T cells. It goes and it integrates itself into helper T cells. It basically like worms its way into the helper T cell. And helper T cells are really important in the human immune system. They produce antibodies, and they're crucial to the response of the immune system to infections, to viral infections, to any sort of foreign object that's invading the body. And here's what is really fascinating about HIV, right? Once the viral RNA enters the cell, the HIV virus, it releases this enzyme called reverse transcriptase. And what reverse transcriptase does is it encourages the body to take up the viral RNA. And what happens is the viral RNA is turned into DNA, right? And that is what is in our bodies. That's what our code is made up of, DNA. And what will happen is this viral DNA that has then been produced will integrate itself into the host DNA, which you can see here. This little green bit, if I zoom in, this is viral DNA, and this is everything blue here, that's human DNA. So what will happen is inside every cell that HIV affects, viral DNA will kind of just join into our own DNA, which can be a little scary to think about, right? And that's why it is so difficult for us to treat HIV, because the HIV DNA is in our own DNA now. That's why it is so hard to get rid of HIV from the body. It stays in our DNA, our genome forever until we die. And so that's why HIV is so scary. But what this viral DNA will do within the cell, it will control the cell, and it will tell the cell, hey, look, you got to produce more HIV proteins, more HIV viruses. And because it's integrated into our own genome, the cell and eventually the body does what the viral DNA tells it to do. It creates more HIV viruses, and it releases them out to the body to infect other helper T cells, which is really quite scary. You can see this kind of positive feedback loop that characterizes almost all viruses. What is different about HIV is that reverse transcriptase process, which is really cool. Reverse transcriptase does a lot of cool stuff to get viral RNA into DNA. Okay, any questions, anybody? Okay, if there are no questions, I'm going to move on to the next slide. This is definitely the most technical slide, by the way. I'm not sure if I should always start with the most technical slide. But yes, this is by far the most technical slide that we are going to go through today. Let me check the chat. Okay, there's nothing in the chat. Cool. All right, let's talk about AIDS, which is AIDS is, let me zoom out a little bit. Oh, you can't see me. There we go. AIDS is like basically the second step to HIV. HIV is not what kills your body, okay? The virus, it affects your cells, but it doesn't do the damage necessary to kill your body. It only weakens the immune system. And so you can see, I wrote here, the immune system, it wears out after a long time of fighting HIV. And because HIV affects helper T cells, these helper T cells die and they struggle to be replaced by the human body. Because so many are dying at the same time, the human body just can't keep up anymore. And killer T cells, which are the kind of like gung-ho fighters that we think of when we think about the immune system, these guys will also stop responding to HIV infection, so we can see over time as HIV is allowed to proliferate in the human body, it becomes a sort of weakening disease where the human body is weakened, the immune system is weakened, and it doesn't function as it would if HIV were not present. We call this condition where the human body and human immune system has become weakened. We call it immunodeficiency, which makes sense, right? Immuno, the first part of the word immunodeficiency refers to the immune system. It refers to immunology, and it refers to your body's ability to fight off viruses, bacteria, other foreign pathogens. Deficiency here, the second part of the word, if it will let me highlight it. Deficiency means just, I'm sure you guys all know what deficiency means. It's just like a lack of any sort of competency, of any sort of ability to do anything, that's a deficiency. And so it's describing the word immunodeficiency as an immune system that has become deficient, right? It lacks the proper capabilities of doing what it should do, which is be a functioning immune system that is capable of fighting off viruses, bacteria, your common cold, even something like COVID-19 or any just kind of foreign invader, right? And so that's what we call AIDS. When the body enters this kind of immunodeficient state, we refer to the state as AIDS. AIDS stands for acquired immunodeficiency syndrome. And that makes sense, right? It is acquired from HIV. It is immunodeficient, and it's a certain syndrome. It's a certain condition where your body can't fight off these super simple pathogens. And so it is not HIV that ultimately kills people who die of HIV/AIDS. It is the AIDS condition that weakens their immune system to the point where they cannot fight off simple infections, like a cold, for example. If a person has a weakened immunodeficient immune system and they are infected with a common cold, that can be really life-threatening, right? The cold is not scary for someone who has a healthy immune system, who is a healthy individual. But if you don't have an immune system, or if you have a weakened immune system, that cold becomes a different story, right? That can kill you. And so that is the danger of acquired immunodeficiency syndrome. Andrew asked me, is HIV alive? Okay, this is a really great question, Andrew. Okay. HIV is a virus, right? That is just the way it works. It doesn't have like a cell nucleus. It doesn't have some of the things that we attribute to life, right? And so generally, the scientific community does not classify viruses as being living things. We do not classify them as being alive. And if we go onto Google here, and I share my Google screen, and we search up are viruses alive? Generally, the consensus is that no, viruses are not alive. There are reasons for this. Andrew, there's like a list of things you need to be able to check off for it to be classified as alive. I personally do not think that viruses check off all the lists, but you will see everywhere online, Andrew, that the debate of whether or not what am I saying? Whether or not a virus is alive is really quite contested. So that's a great question. When you get older, Andrew, you'll be able to take a look at the list of things and you'll be able to decide for yourself if you think viruses are alive. One of the things is like reproduce. And yes, viruses reproduce, but there are other actions, there are other things that viruses need to be capable of to be considered alive. And simply viruses just don't check that entire list. If you give me a second here, I can look at the list. Okay, so just a quick rundown says that all living things need food, water, reproduce, grow, move, breathe, adapt, or respond to their environment, and produce waste. Generally, when you get to biology, you'll get a much more comprehensive and much more specific kind of list. And you will see that scientists tend to like to classify all sorts of living organisms. They like to have this kind of classification system. Think Carlos Linnaeus and taxonomy. And so if you run down the list, I don't think viruses are alive. They're not capable of such things as being able to grow, for example. Is that okay, Andrew? That was a really long-winded answer. Okay, I'm sure Andrew will send me. Okay. A thumbs up, even better. Cool. Okay, does anyone have any more questions on AIDS? Sorry, keep on saying acquired immunodeficiency syndrome. As long as there are no questions, I'm going to move on to the next slide. You guys can always feel free to double back and ask me a question on this slide though. So no worries if you don't have a question right now or if you've accidentally forgotten your question. Okay, let's talk about treatments for HIV/AIDS. Now, I did mention that HIV/AIDS is non-curable as of this moment, right? And when I say non-curable, I mean that we cannot rid the human body of the HIV/AIDS virus, and nor can we take out the integrated DNA, the integrated viral DNA that we saw earlier, right? So now we know that the viral HIV DNA lives forever in the human body, which can be scary, to think about, right? Like, oh, I have to live my life indefinitely with this virus, and I will always be affected by it. And while that to a certain degree is true, you will always have to live with this virus. As of right now, science hasn't gotten to the point where we can go into the human genome and we can cut out the virus, which would be fascinating if we could do that. However, we are able to treat HIV. We are able to give the body a fighting chance. We are able to prevent AIDS from taking hold of the human body. And while we can't solve the exact issue of the viral DNA being in the human DNA, that we have solutions to really help patients who are dealing with HIV live a normal life. And I mean, we can preserve lifespan, and really science has come a long way from the diagnoses of like the 1980s, where HIV was basically a death sentence, really. Nowadays, we have treatments that can reduce the viral load of HIV in the patient bloodstream. Viral load is this term we use to viral load is the term we use to describe the amount of virus in an infected person's blood. And so if you have a really high viral load, it's really easy to pass HIV off to someone else. And so that can be dangerous. However, we've discovered ways that we can reduce the viral load in the human bloodstream, which is really quite amazing. It's nearly amazing. It's really quite impressive that science has gotten to the point where we can say this HIV virus really tears up the human body. And just a couple decades ago, HIV would be a death sentence, really. But now, if a patient comes in with HIV, we can prescribe antiviral drug cocktails, and we can reduce the level of HIV in the bloodstream. We can cut the viral load down to safe numbers where a patient with HIV can no longer pass on HIV because their viral load is so low. And through these drug cocktails, we can allow the immune system to recover. We can prevent the immune system from going into, the state of AIDS, which can be fatal. And so really, in just the span of a couple decades, we've gone from life sentencing, basically death sentences with an HIV diagnosis, to being able to combat HIV and decrease viral load, and giving these patients the opportunity to say, I still have 40 years of my life to live. And that these next 40 years will be almost normal 40 years because of the advancements in science. A lot of these antiviral drug cocktails, they target the way HIV reproduces in the body. They try to really shut down the ability of HIV to reproduce. And if HIV cannot reproduce as well, then the viral load in the human body drops significantly to safe levels where this person can live a normal perfectly fine life. They do have to continue taking these antiviral drug cocktails. However, if you stop taking them, HIV does make a rebound because it will always be integrated into the host DNA. And so, as I said here, patients can live healthy lives with low viral load. They can, as long as they're taking these drug cocktails, there's very low chances of them passing HIV on to other people. And so, it is it is amazing what we have done in the combat against HIV. Any questions about the treatment, anybody, before I go on to a little sector about public health? As long as we have no questions, oh, my computer's turned off. As long as we have no questions, I'm going to move on. There we go. And now let's talk about public health. So as I mentioned before, HIV is a very prevalent public health issue, right? HIV walks happen all the time. It is a very important topic in mainstream media. It is one of the largest modern pandemics that we have ever witnessed. And so it is really quite urgent that we know of HIV, that we understand the impacts HIV can have, and that we find ways to cut down to the root of the problem of HIV, which is cutting the viral DNA out of the human DNA. That is what we ultimately want to be able to do. Right. So a couple things about public health. So HIV/AIDS, like many diseases, disproportionately affects certain populations. If you think about like nearly all diseases, if you think about what's a recent disease like COVID-19 disproportionately impacts people of low income in countries with weak health systems, and so and countries with like low capita per individual and weak healthcare and such things like that. Those are the places where COVID-19 can run rampant. And same thing with HIV. It disproportionately affects gay men, underrepresented people of color, and countries with weaker health systems. A lot of the things about public health that we want to target, it is very basic to the concept of public health that underrepresented communities are irreparably targeted by, not exactly targeted, but irreparably changed by such pandemics like HIV/AIDS, like COVID-19. And so when we go to try to fix this, our work should be directed at communities, at underrepresented communities. And so that is something to keep in mind as you think about possible careers, possible lines of work in the future, right? Because these underrepresented communities of gay men, people of color, and countries with weaker health systems, these are the populations that need HIV research, that need public health support. Those are the populations that need the most. As I mentioned earlier, it is one of the largest modern pandemics. 77 million people worldwide have been affected by HIV. 77 million people is no joke. That is a difficult number of people to visualize. And so the government and scientists are always pouring money and time into a really influential, a really important sector of research, which is to find a cure to HIV/AIDS. A lot of the stuff that we have, antiviral drug cocktails, for example, really only suppress the issue of HIV. They push them on to another day. And of course, they allow the patient to live a life expectancy much higher than what they were able to live decades ago, maybe 20 years ago, 30 years ago. But we still don't have science that can address the root of the problem, which is the fact that the viral DNA is integrated within our own DNA. And so maybe one of you will grow up and you guys will find a way to cut it out, you know? maybe so. And that is a topic that is best saved for gene therapy, for genome editing, for genomics, for CRISPR-Cas9 technology, all of that stuff that is of this generation. And those are the tools we can leverage to take HIV down forever, right? It would be amazing if one day a patient who contracted HIV, could be told that their HIV would not be an issue because through simple, let's say, gene editing technology or simple injection through a syringe, we could cut out the HIV DNA from their own genome, and they wouldn't have to take an antiviral drug cocktail. They wouldn't have to deal with the stigma of living with HIV. And so, that is the dream of a lot of researchers who work in gene editing. Okay, any questions, anybody? Maybe I should share my screen again so you guys can see the screen. This is a picture of an AIDS walk in New York, which is very cool. A lot of these walks go, they go and they raise a lot of money for HIV/AIDS research, which is cool. If you guys ever have the opportunity, these walks, as well as like breast cancer walks, these are all big ways to raise money for these really important kinds of research. Okay, anybody, any questions? I'm done rambling on. Okay, if nobody has any questions, I'm going to stop my screen share. Oh no, that's pause share. Okay, here, stop my screen share. Perfect. I've prepared a GIM kit. I know there's a game mode that a couple of you guys like. It's like the snowball launcher one. I won't be playing this time since last time I played and I was quite good at it, and so you guys didn't want me to play. But yes, Lena, you have a question?
How do you play it?
Okay, right. How do you play the game? I will talk about that in just a second. So I'm going to stop my recording, and all of you guys who want to play the game, you guys can feel free to stay and play the game. If you guys don't want to play the game, I hope you guys learned something, or you guys at least enjoyed the class. I aim to please. And this recording will be on YouTube within the hour. So I will also send the recording link into the group chat. So if you guys want to take a look at the class or just browse through my YouTube channel, you guys can feel free to do that. Okay. All right. I'm going to stop my recording.